Welcome to Truth, the podcast where we journey throughout the remarkable life of Sojourner Truth, a woman whose resilience and courage shaped American history. In this podcast series, we'll explore the many facets of Sojourner Truth's life and legacy, from her early years as a slave to her pivotal role in the fight for freedom and equality.
We'll also examine how her ideas and principles have shaped the world we live in today, informing debates on race, gender, and social justice. We're your hosts, Michelle and Nina, and in today's episode, we'll embark on the first part of our exploration into the life of Sojourner Truth.
Oh, there we live it, baby, there is no limit. Her story begins with uncertainty, as she estimated her birth year to be between 1797 and 1800. She was born to James and Elizabeth Baumfree. She was one of 10 or 12 children. Her father was captured from present-day Ghana, and her mother, nicknamed Mama Bet, was the daughter of slaves captured from Guinea.
The backdrop of her early life was the oppressive system of slavery. Sojourner's family was kept at Colonel Hardenberg's estate in Swatterkill, New York, where she learned Dutch as her first language, but her childhood was marked by upheaval and cruelty.
At just 9 years old, she was then known as Isabella. She was sold at an auction for $100 to John Neely. And from there, her life became a series of heartaches and struggles as she endured beatings and abuse. She was later on sold to Martinus Shriver and then to John Dumont, and her experiences of exploitation and violence would shape her understanding of injustice.
But amidst the darkness, there were glimpses of light. Sojourner fell in love with an enslaved man named Robert, only to have their relationship torn apart by the cruelty of their owners. The loss haunted her, but it also fueled her determination to fight for freedom and justice.
As the winds of change swept across New York, she found herself at a crossroads. The state began the process of abolishing slavery, but promises of freedom were often broken. Despite assurances from Dumont, Sojourner remained enslaved, forced to toil under the guise of injury. In a daring move, she seized her chance of freedom in 1826, escaping with her infant daughter, Sophia. Leaving her other children behind, she sought refuge with the Van Wagenen family, who provided sanctuary until emancipation became law.
But Sojourner's quest for justice didn't end with her own freedom. Learning that her son Peter had been illegally sold into slavery in Alabama, she embarked on a legal battle that would make history. With the support of the Van Wagenens, she took her case to the New York Supreme Court and emerged victorious, reuniting with her son and setting a precedent for justice.
Her journey continued to unfold, marked by moments of resilience and determination. From her conversion to Christianity to her involvement in various communities and movements, she left an indelible mark on history.
In 1843, on Pentecost Sunday, she took the name of Sojourner Truth, embarking on a mission to preach the truth and fight for justice. Her travels took her across the country, where she captivated audiences with her powerful words and unwavering conviction.
As we continue to unravel the chapters of Sojourner Truth's life, we encounter the poignant final years of her journey. Despite the trials she faced, she found solace and comfort in the care of her loved ones.
The U.S. Civil War began in 1861, and by this point, Sojourner Truth was struggling with her health. She had spent about 20 years traveling and speaking out against slavery and in favor for women's rights, and the last decade or so had been through increasingly dangerous territory as conditions became more violent in advance of the war. Although her health started to improve in 1863, she just didn't have the kind of stamina that had been necessary for her long ranging speaking tours in the 1850s.
During the Civil War, Sojourner helped recruit troops to fight for the Union and encouraged the Union to add the abolition of slavery to its objectives for the war. In 1864, she met President Abraham Lincoln, and after the war, she moved to Washington, D.C., and then to the Freedmen's Village in Arlington to try to work with the freed people and help them adjust to life outside of slavery.
She also helped care for hospital patients in the years after the war. In 1865, she was supposed to attend a reception in advance of Lincoln's second inauguration, but she was turned away on account of her race. Her escort, Captain George Cars, answered, "If she's not good enough to enter, then I am not."
Lincoln later apologized for that having happened. After the Civil War, Sojourner continued fighting for civil rights, both through her speaking and through her actions, and she advocated adding women's rights to the Reconstruction Amendments.
As cities started formally segregating by race, she started intentionally boarding segregated streetcars, sometimes staying on board longer than she needed to just to press the issue. At one point, this led to a conductor dislocating her shoulder when he forcibly removed her from the car. She got him fired, and he was arrested on charges of assault and battery. She also filed a suit against the streetcar conductor who tried to keep her from boarding.
Life became increasingly difficult in Washington, D.C., as the influx of freed people sparked a backlash among white residents. Sojourner had been trying to get freed people jobs in Washington, but she gradually began relocating people to other cities instead, particularly Rochester, New York, and eventually she moved back to Battle Creek, Michigan.
She renewed her focus on women's rights, especially Black women's rights, along with helping the poor. In the late 1870s, she began working on a plan to resettle freed people to homesteads in the West, although that never came to fruition.
She gave her last public lecture in 1881, and by that point, she had met three U.S. presidents and had spent decades publicly preaching and publicly advocating for abolition, women's rights, and civil rights. Even so, she'd had to make a habit of carrying a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings about herself and signatures of prominent white abolitionists and women's rights activists, because otherwise, people who hadn't already heard of her didn't really take her seriously, and that was because of her race.
In the twilight of her life, Sojourner Truth was tenderly cared for by her two daughters, providing her with the love and support she had long fought for others to receive. Yet, even in her frailty, her spirit remained unyielding, her mind sharp and resolute.
Several days before her passing, a reporter from the Grand Rapids Eagle visited Sojourner. Despite her frail appearance and her evident pain, her eyes still sparkled with vitality and her mind remained as keen as ever, a testament to her indomitable spirit.
On the early morning of November 26, 1883, Sojourner Truth's remarkable journey came to an end at her Battle Creek home. Her passing marked the close of an era, but her legacy would endure, inspiring generations to come.
2 days later, on November 28th, 1883, friends, family, and admirers gathered at the Congregational Presbyterian Church to bid farewell to Sojourner. Reverend Reed Stewart presided over the service, with prominent citizens of Battle Creek serving as pallbearers.
Nearly 1,000 mourners filled the church, a testament to the profound impact Sojourner had on countless lives. As she was laid to rest in Oak Hill Cemetery, her memory lived on in the hearts of those she had touched.
Across the nation, tributes poured in for the remarkable woman who had dedicated her life to the pursuit of justice. In Washington, D.C., Frederick Douglass delivered a moving eulogy honoring her legacy of resilience and unwavering commitment to social reform.
Sojourner Truth may have departed this world, but her spirit and courage and determination continues to inspire us all, and her legacy lives on.
And today, we have a special segment focusing on two towering figures of the abolitionist movement, Frederick Douglass and Suzanne B. Anthony.
One of the most dramatic ideological confrontations in the history of Black abolitionism occurred when Sojourner Truth interrupted a speech in which Frederick Douglass advocated violent anti slavery tactics and posing the question, "Is God dead?" While it is one of the best remembered of Truth's public remarks, historians have found contradictory evidence about where and when the confrontation occurred.
Truth's question is memorialized on her gravestone, and it embodies her spiritual and moral courage as an anti slavery activist. Truth believed God had a central role in the quest towards the abolition of slavery. She placed God's will over human agency.
Truth's question highlights the connection between Christianity and the anti slavery movement. Her role as a black female abolitionist and her ability to question men and figures of authority despite the social consequences of doing so.
So, joining us today is Frederick Douglass himself, here to shed light on his relationship with Sojourner Truth and the famous confrontation that has been debated by historians for years. Welcome!
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. So, let's start by discussing your relationship with Sojourner Truth. How did you two first meet? And how did you impact each other's lives?
Sojourner and I were both prominent abolitionists dedicated to the cause of ending slavery and advocating for the rights of African Americans. We first crossed paths at various anti-slavery gatherings where we both delivered impassioned speeches. Truth's unwavering commitment to justice and her powerful oratory deeply impressed me. She brought a unique perspective as a black female abolitionist, challenging societal norms and inspiring many, including myself, to question our own beliefs and actions.
That's fascinating how your paths intersected during such a pivotal time in history. Now let's delve into the infamous confrontation where she interrupted one of your speeches. Can you provide some insights into that moment?
Of course. The incident occurred at an anti-slavery meeting in Boston's Faneuil Hall as I was advocating for more assertive tactics in our fight against slavery, believing that moral suasion alone was insufficient. Truth's interruption with her piercing question, "Is God dead?" shook the room, and I was forced to confront the moral implications of our actions.
It's clear that Truth's interruption was a turning point in the meeting. And how did you respond to her challenge?
Initially, I was taken aback by her boldness, but I quickly composed myself and addressed her question before continuing with my speech. While our ideologies differed, I respected her unwavering commitment to her principles and her willingness to challenge the status quo.
It's amazing how your exchange exemplifies the diversity of thought within the abolitionist movement. Now let's explore the broader impact of your work. How did your ideologies differ? And yet, how did you both contribute to the cause of abolition?
We both approached the abolitionist cause from different perspectives. While I initially aligned with Garrisonian principles of nonviolence and moral persuasion, I later embraced more radical tactics, believing that forceful resistance was necessary to bring about an end to slavery. Truth, on the other hand, remained steadfast in her commitment to nonviolence and moral persuasion.
Despite your differences, both of you made significant contributions to the movement. Can you elaborate on the legacy of your collaboration with Truth?
Our collaboration exemplifies the power of diversity within social movement. While we may have disagreed on certain tactics, our shared commitment to justice and equality united us in our struggle against oppression. Truth's question, "Is God dead?" serves as a powerful reminder of the moral and spiritual dimensions of our fight for freedom.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas, for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been a pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey through it.
As we continue to explore relationships that helped shape history, today we also have the privilege of speaking with Suzanne B. Anthony, a pioneer in the fight for women's suffrage. Suzanne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Susan, your collaboration with Sojourner Truth is often celebrated as a crucial moment in the history of social justice movements. Can you tell us about your first encounter with Sojourner and how your relationship developed?
Absolutely. My first encounter with Sojourner Truth was at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851. Sojourner delivered her powerful speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" which left a profound impact on everyone present. I was deeply moved by her words and her unwavering commitment to the cause of women's rights and abolition.
That must have been a remarkable moment. How did your relationship with Sojourner evolve from there?
Well, Sojourner and I shared a common goal of equality, despite facing different forms of oppression. We continued to cross paths at various abolitionist and suffragist gatherings, where we often found ourselves advocating for the same principles. Over time, our admiration for each other's work grew, and we formed a strong bond based on mutual respect and solidarity.
It's inspiring to hear about the solidarity between such influential figures. How did your collaboration with Sojourner influence your respective movements?
Our collaboration was instrumental in bridging the gap between the women's suffrage and abolitionist movements. Sojourner brought a unique perspective as a Black woman fighting against slavery, while I focused on women's rights. Together, we emphasized the interconnectedness of these struggles and advocated for the rights of all marginalized groups. Our partnership helped to broaden the scope of the suffrage movement and laid the foundation for future activism.
That's incredibly significant. In what ways do you think your friendship with Sojourner Truth impacted your own understanding of social justice and equality?
Sojourner Truth taught me the importance of intersectionality and solidarity in the fight for justice. She reminded me that our liberation is intertwined and that we must stand together against all forms of oppression. Through our friendship, I gained a deeper understanding of the intersecting struggles faced by women of color and the need for inclusivity within the suffrage movement. Sojourner challenged me to confront my own privilege and to be a better ally to marginalized communities.
It's evident that your partnership with Sojourner Truth was transformative, not only for your own activism, but for the broader struggle for equality. As we reflect on your legacy today, what lessons do you hope future generations will draw from your relationship with Sojourner?
I hope that future generations will recognize the power of collaboration and solidarity in effecting social change. Sojourner and I may have come from different backgrounds, but our shared commitment to justice brought us together and made our movement stronger. I hope that people will continue to build upon the foundations we laid and work towards a more equitable and inclusive society for all.
Thank you, Suzanne, for sharing your insights and for your tireless dedication to the pursuit of equality. Your legacy continues to inspire us all.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to discuss this important chapter in history.
Imagine a world where injustice and inequality were the norm, where the color of your skin determined your fate, and where women were denied even the most basic rights. It was this tumultuous landscape that Sojourner Truth emerged as a beacon of hope, challenging the status quo and demanding change.
At a time where the abolitionist movement was gaining momentum, Sojourner Truth stood out as a fierce advocate for the rights of enslaved people. Ain't I a Woman's legacy spread like rapid fire and is used in intersectional studies. This speech was critical for women of color, helping to create a more inclusive approach to equality.
Feminism has origins in excluding large groups of people and only focusing on the narratives and needs of white middle-class women. Ain't I a Woman was the first time topics around intersectionality were discussed publicly to a crowd of people of different races and genders. Her famous speech, Ain't I a Woman, delivered at the Women's Rights Convention in 1851, exposed the hypocrisy of a society that professed equality but denied it to the woman of color.
However, it's crucial to acknowledge that the speech we commonly refer to as Ain't I a Woman may not be entirely truthful. In fact, historical records suggest that the version we know today was likely embellished by Frances Gage, a white suffragist, that altered Truth's original words to fit a more conventional narrative.
This discrepancy raises important questions about the authenticity of historical accounts and the erasure of marginalized voices. While Sojourner Truth undoubtedly delivered a powerful message, it's essential to recognize the layers of interpretation and manipulation that have shaped our understanding of her legacy.
Here, the Black abolitionist Sojourner Truth, who was freed from slavery in 1827, speaks to a gathering of feminists in Akron, Ohio in 1851.
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think twixt the Negroes of the South and the women of the North, all talking about rights, the white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helped me in a carriage or over a mud puddle or gives me the best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted. I can work as much. No man can no man can head me. I gathered in the barns, then ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I get it, and bear the lash as well, and ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most of them sold off to slavery, and when I cried out in my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me, and ain't I a woman? When they talk about this thing, what's that thing in the head? What they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What that got to do with a woman's rights, a Negro's rights? If my little cup won't hold but a pint and yours hold a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then, that man there, that little man in black, he said, women can't have rights as much as men, cause Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man ain't had nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back right side up again. And now they is asking to do it. The men better let them.
You might recognize her powerful words from her famous speech, Ain't I a Woman? Brilliantly delivered here by Alfre Woodard. In this speech, Truth challenges the prevailing notions of gender and race, asserting her humanity and demanding recognition and respect. Her message still reverberates in the ongoing struggle for intersectional feminism.
Sojourner Truth's advocacy for the abolition of slavery and racial equity laid important groundwork for the civil rights movements of the 20th century. Her speeches, such as Ain't I a Woman, resonated with audiences then and continue to inspire activists today. Truth's emphasis on the humanity and dignity of marginalized communities helped to shape the moral and philosophical foundations of the civil rights movement, influencing leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks.
Truth's contributions to the women's rights movement highlights the importance of intersectionality, a concept that acknowledges how different forms of oppression intersect and compound one another. In her speeches, Truth spoke out against both racial and gender discrimination, emphasizing the unique struggles faced by Black women. Today, intersectional feminism continues to be a central framework for understanding and addressing the complexities of discrimination faced by women of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and other marginalized communities.
Levels. Students learn about her journey from slavery to freedom, her powerful speeches, and her tireless efforts to advocate for justice. In classrooms around the world, Truth's story serves as a powerful example of courage, resilience, and the pursuit for equality. Educational initiatives that highlight her contributions help to ensure her legacy is passed on to future generations.
Sojourner Truth's legacy continues to inspire activists and organizers who are fighting for social justice today. Her emphasis on speaking truth to power, challenging injustice, and advocating for marginalized communities resonates with contemporary movements for racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ rights, and more. By invoking Truth's name and teachings, activists draw strength from her example and amplify her message of empowerment and liberation for all. May we carry forward Sojourner's spirit of courage and resilience in our own pursuit of justice and equality. And for our next segment, we have crazy fun facts about Sojourner Truth with Michelle. Stay tuned, guys! So, for some crazy fun facts that weren't covered in mainly our first segment of the podcast, we have a couple crazy ones that maybe were predictable or not. Some, at least for me, weren't. And to start, we have how Sojourner Truth was haunted by the beating of her enslaved lover all her life. So, as mentioned, she found love with Robert in 1815 when she was around 18 years old, and Robert was an enslaved man on a nearby farm. And he was enslaved to a man named Charles Carton Jr., who was against his relationship with Sojourner. So, Charles had forbid his slaves from marrying others since he wasn't their master and he wouldn't own the children that would be born. And once Robert had snuck out to go see Sojourner, and once Charles found out, he beat him brutally. Um, and they never met after the incident, and he actually ended up dying a couple years later. And it's said that she was haunted by that experience her entire life. I know that was definitely a bit of a hard fact. Um, but for the next one, she was actually the first Black woman to win a custody case against a white man. She had learned that Peter, her eldest son, was illegally sold, so she had filed a lawsuit against Dumont and prevailed and actually won custody of her son, which made her the first Black woman to sue a white man in the US court and win. So, and with that, um, for our next fun fact, we have Sojourner Truth's recognition. She'd been honored in various ways after her death, but actually, there is a statue of Sojourner Truth in the US Capitol's Emancipation Hall that was put up in 2009, and she was listed among the top 100 all time significant Americans by the Smithsonian Magazine. And with that, as well as in 2016, the US Treasury Department announced that an image of truth would appear on the back of the newly designed $10 bill, along with Suzanne B. Anthony, Alice Paul, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mont. And I would say these last two, three facts are probably the ones I found to be most unexpected. One, that she had converted to Methodism when she escaped slavery, so she believed in God's guidance in her activism, and she later became a lay preacher who would travel around the country and deliver sermons that were focused on social justice, equality, and religious values. So she gained a lot of practical knowledge on her herbal medicine during her time and developed a reputation as a skilled healer in communities. So she treated a number of people using plants and herbs and offered emotional and spiritual support to those who were facing personal struggles. My apologies. And she had a very empathetic nature, which made her a source of solace and just strength for many people. As well as for our next one, that she had joined the women's temperance movement, which was for anti-alcohol, and it was just an organization of the American temperance movement, and she just advocated for self-control and moral uprightness, and just believed that she also championed women's rights and believed that the movement could empower women. Um, and for our last fact was that Sojourner was a vegetarian. Several biographies mention her commitment to healthy living and preference for plant-based foods. In the 19th century, she participated in movements, some of which advocated for vegetarianism alongside other social reforms, and a lot of scholars link her being a vegetarian to religious views and ethical concerns about animal welfare. And many have noticed that her path to being vegetarian was linked to her being a healer. And that is all for our crazy fun facts about Sojourner Truth with Michelle. Thanks for listening. And I definitely would say the one that caught me the most off guard would probably be her being a healer and a vegetarian. But I wonder what you guys think. And on to Michelle Nina's final takes. For some closing thoughts, I think Nina and I would like to share some of our final thoughts on Sojourner Truth. I mean, overall, I think we both know, and well, we all know how much of a remarkable figure she is, and how her legacy is just always going to continue to inspire and like resonate with everyone around the world, and how like her story is just like a testament to determination and just courage when facing adversity. And you know, just everything she had to endure and how she just refused to be silenced and instead just like found her own voice and used it to advocate for what she believed in. Um, and learning about this in class and just learning about other abolitionists is, but just getting to do a podcast on it is just so, I would say, rewarding just to learn about. Because I feel like personally, I didn't learn much about Sojourner Truth before. I feel like in class we mainly learn about like the basic, not basic, but I would say, um, I don't know, like people like Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, but just in this class and just in general, getting to know about other abolitionists is something that everyone should be doing. Just getting to know their history more, I would say. I don't know. What do you think, Nina?
I agree. It was really amazing hearing about her legacy in a classroom setting. In my previous classes, I mostly talked about MLK and people like Harriet Tubman, which is amazing to hear about also. But it's not quite the same as Sojourner Truth, and it's important to preserve the legacies that aren't always told as openly because they don't fit certain narratives. I also thought it was really amazing how Sojourner Truth impacted the feminist movements for women of color. Bell Hooks has the book titled Ain't I a Woman that just talks about intersectionality and the different struggles women of color went through during these times and how it was different from white women's struggles and how it differed from men's struggles while trying to abolish slavery. So she's truly an amazing figure, and I hope that people learn more about her in schools.
And that is all to conclude Nina and I's final takes. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. And let us know if you'd like another episode on more fun facts and on the legacy and story of Sojourner Truth, or if you'd like to hear about someone else. Thank you so much again, guys, and may Cherry Moon take it away.
That we live in, baby, there is no limit.
This episode of Truth by Michelle and Nia is sponsored by Radical Voices of Resistance Spring 2024.